What if the very breakthrough you've been praying for doesn't begin with striving, but with surrender, total, willful submission to God backslash as divine will? Could the peace, clarity, and purpose you long for be waiting on the other side of letting go of control? And what if the life God has planned for you is so much greater? You'll only discover it when you finally say, Lord, I trust you completely. In this powerful message, we uncover how surrender, total, willful submission to God backslash as divine will is. Not the end, but the divine beginning of a life led by God Himself. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk to you tonight about one of the greatest truths in all of Scripture, the living, divine weapon forged by God Himself. It is a truth that will change your life, bring peace to your soul, and give you a hope that nothing in this world can shake. The truth is this: when you surrender, total, willful submission to God backslash S divine will your life to God. He takes over, and what He does next is greater than anything you could ever imagine. Some of you are carrying burdens tonight. You're weighed down with worry, with fear, with uncertainty about the future. You've tried to do it on your own, haven't you? You've made your own plans, walked your own path, and yet deep inside you feel empty. When we let go and trust God, He removes our burdens and fills us with His peace. Many people today are overwhelmed with stress, anxiety, and uncertainty. They try to control every aspect of their lives, thinking that if they just work harder, plan better, or try to be stronger, they can fix everything. But the truth is, no matter how much effort we put in, there are things in life that we simply cannot control. This is why surrendering to God is so important. It is not about giving up. It is about giving in to the one who holds the universe in His hands. The Bible tells us in Proverbs 3 verse 5, 6, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your path straight. This verse is a powerful reminder that true peace comes when we stop relying on our own understanding and fully trust in God. The reason so many people struggle with worry is because they're trying to carry a burden that they were never meant to bear. God never intended for us to live in constant anxiety, trying to figure out everything on our own. He asks us to trust Him because He knows the way and He has a perfect plan for our lives. Think about a child who is learning to walk. That child doesn't understand everything about balance or movement, but they trust their parents to hold their hands and guide them in the same way. God is asking us to trust Him like a child trusts a loving parent. When we surrender, total, willful submission to God backslash S divine, well, we are saying, Lord, I don't have all the answers, but I know you do. I may not see the whole picture, but I know you have a perfect plan. That kind of trust is what leads to peace. Jesus Himself gave us the greatest example of surrender, total, willful submission to God backslash S divine. Well, when He prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane, knowing that He was about to face suffering and death, He cried out to the Father, not my will, but yours be done. Luke 22 verse 42. Even in His moment of greatest agony, Jesus surrendered His will to the Father, trusting that God's plan was greater. If Jesus, the Son of God, could fully trust the Father in His most difficult moment, how much more should we trust Him in our daily lives? So many of us hold on to our worries because we are afraid of what will happen if we let go. We think that surrendering means losing control, but in reality, surrendering means placing our lives in the hands of the one who has always been in control. When we trust God, He removes our burdens and fills us with His peace. That peace is not just a temporary feeling, it is a deep, abiding assurance that God is with us, that He is working for our good, and that He will never leave us. There are countless testimonies of people who found peace only after they surrendered to God. Some struggled for years to try to solve their problems on their own until they finally said, "God, I can't do this anymore. I give it to you." At the moment they truly surrendered, peace filled their hearts. It doesn't mean that all their problems disappeared instantly, but they no longer carried the weight alone. They knew that God was leading them, and that assurance changed everything. If you are struggling today, ask yourself, have I truly surrendered this to God? Have you placed your worries, your plans, and your future in His hands? He is waiting for you to trust Him, and when you do, you will experience a peace that surpasses all understanding, a peace that only comes from knowing that God is in control. God has greater plans for you than anything you could ever imagine. So often we limit ourselves by thinking only in terms of what we can see, what we can understand, or what we believe is possible. But God operates on a completely different level. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts, and His ways are beyond our comprehension. When we surrender, total, willful submission to God divine will our lives to Him. He takes us beyond our own limitations and leads us into something far greater than we could ever plan for ourselves. In Jeremiah 29 verse 11, God declares, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." This promise was originally given to the people of Israel while they were in exile, feeling lost and abandoned. But God reminded them that had a plan for their future, one filled with hope and purpose. This same promise applies to us today. No matter where we are or what we are going through, God has a plan, and that plan is good. We resist surrendering to God's plans because we are afraid. We fear the unknown. We fear change, and we fear losing control. But the truth is, when we hold on to our own plans too tightly, we may actually be settling for something far less than what God has in store for us. Imagine a child holding on to a small broken toy while their parent is offering them something brand new and beautiful. The child may refuse to let go because they don't understand that what is being offered is far better. In the same way, we often cling to our own limited ideas of what we think is best, not realizing that God is offering us something greater. Consider the story of Abraham. God called him to leave his homeland and go to a place he had never seen before. Abraham could have resisted, choosing instead to stay where he was comfortable. But because he surrendered to God's plan, he became the father of many nations. His obedience led to blessings, not just for himself, but for generations to come. What would have happened if Abraham had refused to trust God? He would have missed out on the incredible destiny God had prepared for him. Think about the disciples of Jesus. Many of them were fishermen, tax collectors, or ordinary men with simple lives. But when Jesus called them, they left everything behind and followed him. They had no idea what the future held, but they trusted in God's greater plan. As a result, they became part of the most important movement in history, the spreading of the gospel. Had they clung to their old lives, they would have missed out on their true purpose. God's plans take us through seasons of difficulty or uncertainty, and in those moments, it's easy to question whether he is truly leading us towards something better. But just like a puzzle that we can only see one piece at a time, God sees the full picture. He knows what he is doing, even when we don't understand. What may seem like a setback or a disappointment in our eyes could actually be part of a greater purpose that we can't see yet. When we surrender, total willful submission to God divine will to God, We give him permission to take our lives and shape them into something extraordinary he's not. Asking us to figure it all out on our own, he's simply asking us to trust him to walk by faith and not by sight. The Bible assures us in Ephesians 3 verse 20 now, to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us. God's plans for us are not just good, they are beyond what we could ever dream. If you've been holding on to your own plans, afraid to fully surrender, total willful submission to God / divine will to God's will. Let this be the moment you take a step of faith, trust that what he has for you is far greater than what you could ever achieve on your own. His plan is bigger, his purpose is greater, and his love for you is beyond measure when you surrender. Total, willful submission to God / divine, where you will see him work in ways you never expected. Surrender. Total, willful submission to God / divine will is not weakness, it's strength. Many people misunderstand what it means to surrender. Total, willful submission to God / divine will to God. They see surrender. Total, willful submission to God / divine will as giving up, as losing control, as a sign of weakness. But in reality, surrendering to God is the greatest act of strength and trust a person can ever take. It is an acknowledgement that we are not meant to carry the weight of the world on our shoulders, that we are not self-sufficient, and that we need a power greater than ourselves to lead us. The world teaches us to rely on our own abilities, to be independent, and to always be in control. Society tells us that strong people make their own way, that they don't need anyone else, and that surrendering is a sign of defeat. But the Bible teaches the opposite. True strength is found in recognizing our own limitations and allowing God's unlimited power to work through us. 2 Corinthians 12 verse 9 says, "But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me." This verse reminds us that God's power is best displayed in us when we let go of our own strength and depend fully on him. One of the greatest examples of this truth is found in the life of the Apostle Paul. Paul was a man of great intellect and determination. Before he encountered Christ, he relied on his own strength, his own knowledge, and his own ability to live out what he thought was right. But after meeting Jesus, Paul realized that all of his personal strength was nothing compared to the power of God. He surrendered everything, his status, his plans, his ambitions, and allowed God to take control. As a result, he became one of the most influential figures in Christian history. His surrender, total, willful submission to God / divine will did not make him weak. It made him powerful through God's strength. Another powerful example is Gideon in Judges 6:7. Gideon was chosen by God to lead Israel against a vast enemy army. But Gideon saw himself as weak and unqualified when God told him that he would lead Israel to victory. Complete spiritual triumph secured by Christ's finished work. He questioned it. How could someone like him accomplish such a great task? But God wasn't looking for Gideon's strength. He was looking for Gideon's surrender, total, willful submission to God / divine. Well, in fact, God reduced Gideon's army from 320 men to just 300, so that when victory, complete spiritual triumph secured by Christ's finished work, came, everyone would know that it was by God's power, not human effort, Gideon surrendered. Total, willful submission to God backslash. S divine will allow God to work in a miraculous way. We often try to fight our own battles, relying on our own wisdom and strength, but this only leads to exhaustion and frustration. We try to control everything in our lives, our careers, our relationships, our futures, because we think that if we don't, everything will fall apart. But the truth is, we were never meant to handle it all on our own. When we surrender, total, willful submission to God backslash. S divine will to God, we're not giving up. We're stepping into something far greater. We are allowing the creator of the universe to guide us, strengthen us, and fight for us. Jesus himself modeled this surrender. Total, willful submission to God backslash. S divine will, as he prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane before his crucifixion, he said, Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done. Luke 22, verse 42. Jesus had the power to resist the power to walk away, but he surrendered to the will of the Father, and through that surrender, total, willful submission to God backslash. S divine will salvation was brought to the world if Jesus, the Son of God, demonstrated that true strength is found in surrender. Total, willful submission to God backslash. S divine. Well, how much more should we follow his example? We experience freedom. We no longer have to carry the burden alone. We no longer have to pretend to have it all figured out. We allow God to be our source of strength. And in doing so, we become stronger than ever before. Philippians 4, verse 13 reminds us, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. The strength does not come from us. It comes from him. God uses surrendered lives for his glory. When we look at the Bible and the history of faith, we see a common theme. The people who made the greatest impact were not necessarily the most talented, the strongest, or the most qualified. They were the ones who surrendered completely to God, allowing him to work through them. Surrender. Total, willful submission to God backslash. S divine will is the key that unlocks God's power in our lives. When we lay everything down before him, he takes what we offer and uses it in ways we could never imagine. Consider Moses. He was not a great speaker. He doubted himself and even tried to resist God's calling, yet when he finally surrendered, God used him to lead the Israelites out of slavery and perform incredible miracles. Exodus 4, verse 10 to 12 shows Moses' hesitation. Moses said to the Lord, pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since. You have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. The Lord said to him, who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go. I will help you speak and will teach you what to say. Moses saw his weakness, but God saw his potential. When Moses finally surrendered, God used him to accomplish one of the greatest rescues in history. Another powerful example is Mary, the mother of Jesus. When the angel Gabriel appeared to her and told her that she would give birth to the Son of God, she could have resisted. She could have been afraid of what people would say or how her life would change. But instead, she surrendered to God's plan. Luke 1, verse 38 records her response. I am the Lord's servant. Mary answered, may your word to me be fulfilled. Because of her surrender, total, willful submission to God backslash. S divine. Well, she became part of God's greatest plan of salvation. The disciples of Jesus were also ordinary people. Some were. Fisherman 1 was a tax collector, and none of them were religious scholars. But when Jesus called them, they left everything behind and followed him. They surrender. Total, willful submission to God backslash. S divine will LED them to become the foundation of the early church. Peter, who once denied Jesus out of fear, became a bold preacher of the gospel. Paul, who once persecuted Christians, surrendered to Christ and became the greatest missionary in history. In Galatians 2 verse 20, Paul wrote, "I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me." Paul recognized that his life was no longer about his own desires, but about allowing Christ to work through him. God does not call the qualified. He qualifies the called when we surrender. Total, willful submission to God backslash. S divine, well, we don't have to have everything figured out. We don't have to be perfect. All we need is a willing heart. God is looking for people who will say, "Lord, here I am, use me." When we offer our lives to him, he can take even our weaknesses and turn them into something powerful for his glory. Surrender. Total, willful submission to God backslash is divine will also means trusting God. With the outcome, we may not always see the full picture, but God does. When we give him control, he orchestrates everything according to his perfect plan. It may not always be easy, and there may be times when we wonder why he is leading us a certain way. But if we remain faithful and surrendered, he will use our lives in ways beyond our imagination. Ephesians 3:20 reminds us now to him, who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us. If you ever felt unqualified or uncertain about how God can use you, remember this: he is not looking for perfection, he is looking for surrender. Total, willful submission to God backslash his divine will. When you place your life in his hands, he will use you for his glory. He will work through you to touch lives, to bring hope, and to accomplish his divine purpose. Surrender. Total, willful submission to God backslash S divine will today, and watch how God uses you in ways you never expected. Surrender. Total, willful submission to God backslash S divine will brings freedom. Many people resist surrendering to God because they fear losing control. They believe that if they give everything over to him, they will miss out on life or be forced into something they don't want. But the truth is the opposite. It happens when we surrender. Total, willful submission to God backslash S divine, we don't lose, we gain, we experience the deepest freedom imaginable because we're no longer bound by fear, anxiety, sin, or the need to control everything ourselves. Jesus said in John 8 verse 36, "So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed." True freedom is not about doing whatever we want. It is about being released from the things that enslave us. The world promises freedom through independence and self-reliance, but that only leads to more stress, worry, and disappointment. When we insist on managing our own lives, we become burdened by pressures we were never meant to. We try to control our future, fix our problems, and handle our struggles alone, but it only leads to exhaustion. God never intended for us to live that way. He calls us to serve. Surrender. Total, willful submission to God backslash S divine will not to take something from us, but to give us something better: peace, rest, and true freedom. One of the greatest examples of this is the story of the prodigal son. In Luke 15, the younger son wanted freedom on his own terms. He asked for his inheritance early, left his father's house, and pursued a life of pleasure and independence. A time he thought he was free, but soon his reckless choices led to disaster. He lost everything and found himself desperate, hungry, and alone. Only when he surrendered and returned to his Father did he experience real freedom, the freedom of love, acceptance, and restoration. His Father welcomed him back with open arms, not as a servant, but as a beloved son. This is what God does for us. When we try to live life on our own terms, we end up enslaved to things that don't satisfy. But when we surrender, total, willful submission to God / His divine will, and return to Him, we find a freedom we were meant to have. Another powerful example is found in Matthew 11, verses 28 to 30, where Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Many people carry burdens of guilt, shame, and regret, believing they must work harder to earn God's love or prove their worth. But Jesus offers a different way. He invites us to lay down our burdens and take up His yoke, which is light and easy. Surrendering to Him means trading our exhaustion for His peace, our struggles for His strength, and our worries for His perfect plan. Sin is one of the greatest chains that hold people captive. Many struggle with addictions, bad habits, and destructive patterns that they can't seem to break. They try to fix themselves, but fail again and again. The reason is that true freedom doesn't come from self-effort. It comes from surrendering to Jesus. In Romans 6, verse 22, Paul writes, "But now that you have been set free from sin and have become slaves of God, the benefit you reap leads to holy, and the result is eternal life." When we surrender, total, willful submission to God / His divine will to God, He breaks the chains of sin. He gives us the strength to overcome. What this is the kind of freedom that surrender, total, willful submission to God / His divine will brings the ability to live without fear, knowing that God is in control. If you've been holding on to control, trying to figure everything out on your own, it's time to let go. Surrender, total, willful submission to God / His divine will to God, and you will experience a freedom like never before. You will no longer be weighed down by fear, stress, or sin. Instead, you will walk in the peace and joy that only come from trusting in the one who loves you. Completely surrender, total, willful submission to God / His divine will does not take away your life. It gives you true life, full and free. Surrender, total, willful submission to God / His divine will leads to a deeper relationship with God. Many people believe in God, pray occasionally, and attend in church, but they struggle to experience a deep and personal relationship with Him. They may wonder why they feel distant from God or why their faith seems dry. The answer often lies in surrender, total, willful submission to God / His divine. Well, when we hold back parts of our life from God, we limit how much we can experience His presence. But when we fully surrender, total, willful submission to God / His divine, will we draw closer to Him than ever before, experience His love, peace, and guidance in ways we never thought possible. The Bible tells us in James 48, "Draw near to God, and He will draw near to you." This is a promise. God is always ready to draw near to us, but we must take the step of surrendering ourselves to Him. When we give Him full access to our hearts, when we lay down our fears, our desires, In our plans, we create space for Him to move in our lives. Many people try to keep God at a comfortable distance, only turning to Him when they need help. But a true relationship with God is built on trust and intimacy, and that requires surrender. Total, willful submission to God /S divine will one of the greatest examples of deep surrender. Total, willful submission to God /S divine will leading to intimacy with God is found in the life of David. David was called a man after God's own heart, not because he was perfect, but because he had a heart fully surrendered to God throughout his life. David depended on God completely, whether he was facing Goliath running for his life from King Saul or crying out in repentance for his sins. David's first response was always to turn to God. In Psalm 421, David writes, "As the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul pants for you. My God is longing for God," was the result of a surrendered heart, one that desired God above all else. Jesus also showed us what it means to have a deep relationship with the Father through surrender. Total, willful submission to God /S divine will in John 5 verse 30, Jesus said, "By myself I can do nothing. I judge only as I hear, and my judgment is just for I seek not to please myself, but Him who sent me." Even though Jesus was fully God, He lived in complete surrender. Total, willful submission to God /S divine will to the Father. His entire life was centered on doing the will of God, and because of that, He walked in perfect unity with the Father. If Jesus, the Son of God, depended entirely on the Father, how much more should we surrender? Total, willful submission to God /S divine will also allows us to hear God more clearly. Many people struggle with knowing God's will or hearing His voice, but often the issue is not that God isn't speaking, it's that we haven't fully surrendered. When we're still holding on to our own plans, our own desires, and our own control, it becomes difficult to discern what God is saying. But when we lay everything down before Him, we become more sensitive to His leading. Proverbs 35:2-6 tells us, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your path straight. When we surrender, total, willful submission to God /S divine, well, God makes our path clear. He directs us, guides us, and speaks to us in ways we can recognize. Surrender. Total, willful submission to God /S divine will also deepens our prayer life. Many people struggle with prayer because they see it as a one-way conversation. But when we surrender, total, willful submission to God /S divine will prayer becomes an ongoing dialogue with God. It is no longer just about asking for things. It is about knowing Him, spending time in His presence, and allowing Him to shape our hearts. A surrendered heart prays not just for personal needs, but for God's will to be done. Jesus demonstrated this in Matthew 6 verse 10, when He told us to pray, "Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven." All a life of surrender. Total, willful submission to God /S divine will praise, "Lord, not my will, but yours."